The first thing I saw wasn't the ceiling or the nurse. It was a photo of a red sold sign jammed into my roses. My neighbor Ruth had sent it with no caption, as if silence could soften the blow. The arrow on the sign pointed at my porch swing, the one Tom hung so low our feet scraped the boards. For a second I thought it was a mistake. Then the nurse adjusted my oxygen, the tube tickled my nose, and the beeping told me I was still here, inside a life that had shifted without me. Another text followed. Mark said it's done. Are you okay? The room smelled like antiseptic. I tasted cotton and metal the way fear tastes when you can't swallow. I pressed the call button with a hand that wasn't steady. The nurse came, kind eyes above a blue mask. Do you need pain meds, Mrs. Hart? She asked. I needed answers. Instead, I asked for my phone charger because the battery blinked like a heart. Mark's message popped up while the cord was still in my hand. It was time, for your good, we're moving you someplace safer. He added a smile I had learned to fear, 2 lines that made my ribs feel like a cracked fence. I used the paper you signed, he wrote, so you wouldn't have to stress. The paper, the medical power of attorney I'd signed for surgery day, not for a sale. He had waited until I was under, until my blood pressure was someone else's job, and he sold the house where I had been a wife, a mother, a woman with her own keys. I tried to answer and couldn't find the words. Morphine made my tongue heavy, but my mind did its work. He sold my home while I was asleep. The sentence rang like a bell inside me, clear and cold. I thought of the porch steps Tom fixed after the winter ice, the pencil marks on the pantry wall where Mark's height had climbed year by year, the attic that still held the crib we kept for someday. All of it folded into a file folder I had not seen and a closing I had not attended. The nurse lifted the blanket at my feet. Warm enough, she asked. Warmth felt like a story from last week. I asked her to dial Ruth for me. When Ruth answered, her voice shook with the kind of anger friends hold like a bowl. Evie, they had movers there before noon, she said. Do you want me to grab anything? My chest ached in a way the doctors hadn't warned me about. The album on the hall table, I whispered. The one with the blue ribbon, hold it tight. She promised she would, then breathed with me until my heartbeat quieted. What kind of safety erases a life? I asked the dark when the nurse dimmed the lights. No one answered, but I heard Tom anyway, steady as ever, as if he had stepped out to the shed and would be right back. He had taught me to keep a simple promise to myself, hold steady. He had taught me something else too, something I had kept so well I almost forgot it. I closed my eyes and there it was, bright as the sold sign, the key, not to a door but to a truth he made me practice until my hands knew the shape. I didn't understand it then, not fully, but everything was about to change. The key, I remembered, didn't open a door, it opened a life. To understand it, you need to know the street I loved and the people who built me. My house sat on a quiet bend where maples made a green tunnel in summer and a gold one in fall. In spring, the mailboxes wore spider webs like lace, and in winter our steps sounded like glass. My porch was small and honest, with chipped blue paint along the rail where I rested my coffee. I tied the rose canes with kitchen twine in March, and by June they leaned toward the sun the way people lean toward music they know. The kitchen was the warm center of everything. I cooled pies on a wire rack near the window, and the smell of cinnamon floated into the hall like a good roomer. Tom had set the oven level with a folded matchbook, then laughed when it stayed that way for 20 years. We kept the big mixing bowl on the lower shelf so a grandchild could reach it without asking. Life had a rhythm there, the kettle's whistle, the clock's slow tick, the creak of the back door that never learned to be quiet. Tom was a steady man with careful hands. He built shelves that never sagged and mended quarrels before they cracked. He called me Evie even when we were gray, and his pockets always carried a piece of soft string as if he might need to tie up a loose end at any moment. When his heart failed him, mine learned a new kind of work. At his bedside I bent close and he told me what he had told me for years. Hold steady, Evie. I promised I would. I held his hand until his fingers cooled, and then I held the house like a lantern through the dark. Mark was our only child, all charm and bright plans. He sold houses for a living and seemed to speak in shining brochures. He knew the power of a fresh coat of paint and a staged bowl of green apples. He liked big gestures and quick deals, the kind that made a room applaud. He married Lena, who wore her hair in a smooth knot and her watch a minute fast. She called me Mom like it was both a compliment and a warning. They moved through life as if it were a hallway in a hurry, everything neat, everything forward. I loved them without question, but I did learn to guard the small corners of my days. Mark's voice could fill a space until my own voice felt unnecessary. When he was a boy, that music was sweet. As a man, it had a tempo that sometimes trampled softer songs. We were close, but our closeness rode on rails he often laid. He meant well, or he said he did, and I chose to believe him because that is what mothers do when belief seems easier than a fight. When my cardiologist circled a surgery date on a yellow calendar, I began to prepare like the old librarian I was. I made a binder, medicines, allergies, phone numbers, insurance cards, even a note on the cat's feeding. I told the church, and the prayer chain lit up like a string of porch lights on a long street. I filled the freezer with soups and labeled them with tape. Mark asked for a paper that would let him pay a bill or sign a receipt if something came up. Just for surgery day, Mom, he said. Mr. Hale, our family lawyer, printed a narrow medical power of attorney. We sat in his wood-smelling office, signed and left with copies clipped neat. I felt prudent. I also felt small, like a woman rubbing a lucky coin. Mr. Hale had drawn up our wills years earlier. He wore sweater vests even in July and kept lemon drops in a cut glass bowl. He never pushed, he just asked questions that made you see the hole in your own boat. After Tom died, Mr. Hale slid a deed across the desk and said we should record a life estate to keep me safe in the house. We did it. He told me to keep originals where I kept my breath. So I taped the safe deposit box key inside an old church cookbook between the pages for funeral potatoes and 7-layer salad. I had shown the hiding place to no one. There was one more piece I kept even quieter. Years back during Mark's first divorce, he came to me with a plan. He asked me to hold a small lake lot in my name so nothing gets messy. He said it was temporary, a bit of cover until papers settled. He looked tired and grateful and called me his rock. I said yes. Mr. Hale filed the deed to me alone with a note to transfer it back when the dust cleared. It never came up again and I never pressed. What a son asks his mother in a storm feels like duty, and duty often wears the mask of love. My faith held boundaries, my purse, my pen, my say. Love looked like trust and sometimes like silence. I thought I had planned for everything until the plan decided to test me. Morning was coming and it would ask for proof. The calm before the storm morning arrived like a hush laid over the house, the kind of hush that made every small sound ring true. Steam rose from my teacup and curled in the winter light, thin as thread. When I set the cup down, the saucer clicked once like a clock agreeing with me. I stood at the kitchen window and watched frost breathe over the garden, each leaf edged with white. The world looked gentle and breakable, and for a moment I believed I was too. I moved room to room like a slow tide. In the living room, the photo frames made a line across the mantel: birthdays, graduations, Mark in braces, and then in a suit, Tom with sawdust on his shoulders and a grin he tried to hide. I wiped a thumbprint from the glass and felt the faint ring of Tom's hammer still living in the studs, as if it held memory deeper than we knew. The banister smelled of lemon oil from last night's wipe, and the handrail was warm where years of hands had trained it to be kind. Upstairs, I paused at our bedroom door. My robe brushed the floor with a whisper. The bed was made tight hospital corners that would have pleased any nurse. I opened the dresser and touched Tom's folded handkerchief, soft from 100 washings, then closed the drawer and let my palm rest there a second longer. The window latch in the hall stuck until I nudged it just right, the way Tom taught me after he shimmed it with a penny. I loved that penny like a secret. I loved the way small solutions lasted, outliving the worry that made them. The house held its breath while I packed my small bag. Slippers, a brush, the binder with tabs I had labeled the way I used to label library shelves, everything in its place, every name with a home. I slipped the safe deposit key deeper into the old church cookbook between funeral potatoes and a page stained with vanilla. Don't be foolish, I told myself. You're coming back. The key lay there anyway, a thin blade of certainty tucked where only I would think to look. When I reached the porch, the old swing creaked hello. The blue paint along the rail had flaked into little moons, and I thought about repainting in spring. The roses were nothing but canes tied with twine, their thorns catching light like pins. I pressed the porch light switch out of habit and left it on even though the sun was up. It felt like leaving a message: hold this place for me. I looked back from the steps and saw the rooms as a map in my mind, every corner speaking. The house and I had been married longer than some people. Mark pulled into the driveway with the confidence of a man on schedule. He tapped the horn twice, cheerful, and came up the walk with a thermos and a smile that worked on everyone but Wood. "Ready, Mom?" he said, as if readiness were a coat you just put on. He kissed my cheek, brisk and sweet. Behind him, the cold air moved with a clean edge. "You don't have to worry about a thing," he said, lifting my bag before I reached for it. "I'll take care of everything." I wanted to believe the little boy I used to send to the store with $2 and a list. I looked into his eyes and saw a shine I knew too well, success rehearsing itself in the mirror. Lena texted him a string of blue messages, and he slid the phone away without reading them, a magician's move. On the ride, the town looked smaller, as if the car windows had learned how to shrink a life. We passed the bakery where Tom used to buy jelly donuts on Fridays and the school where I read picture books to first graders who listened with their whole faces. Snow flurries tried to start and thought better of it. Mark talked about the parking pass, the elevator, the anesthesiologist's reputation. He had a plan for every hallway. "I called the hospital billing department," he said. "If anything comes up, I'll handle it, you just rest." I tucked my hands under my coat and watched the road unspool. "Thank you," I said, and meant it, because kindness deserves the dignity of being believed at least once. At the drop-off, he offered his arm the way men in old movies do, and for a moment I let the scene be pretty. The automatic doors opened to a rush of warmed air that smelled like sanitizer and orange. We rode the elevator with a volunteer who wore a vest full of pins. When we stepped into pre-op, the world turned soft and busy. Nurses moved like good music, quietly fast. A woman asked me my name and birth date 3 times, and I liked the way it made me real. In the little curtained room, I changed into a gown that tied wrong and sat on the edge of the bed with my feet in paper socks. The anesthesiologist had kind eyes and a voice that made counting feel like prayer. "We'll keep you comfortable," he said. "You'll be chatting with us in no time." He marked the chart with clean strokes, then waited while I made a small call to the church. Ruth's voice came through like a hand on my shoulder. "We've got you," she said. "Soup is lined up. I'll check the porch." Mark stood by the bed, flipping his wedding ring around his finger, a habit he claimed not to notice. "It's routine," he said. "You'll wake up and I'll have it all handled." He leaned down and kissed my forehead. "Hold steady, Mom," he added, like he was lending me my own line. His smile brimmed like a promise, but there was something behind it I didn't know how to hear, a thrum under the melody. A nurse hung a clear bag of fluid, and coolness slid into my arm. The cuff hugged and released my bicep in slow squeezes. I closed my eyes and pictured the porch light still burning at home, a little star attached to our roof. I imagined Tom in the shed, wiping his hands on a rag, telling me he'd meet me at the truck. Around us, monitors beeped in conversation, and the curtains swayed as if a breeze knew the way in. "If you need anything," Mark said, "you call me, I'll be right outside." He straightened the edge of the blanket with precise little tugs, the way his father used to fold maps. I rested my palm over the place where the binder lay in my bag, tabs waiting like obedient soldiers. I had done all the right things, yet some part of me threaded caution through my calm, a stitch you could only see if you turned the cloth over. The anesthesiologist returned with the mask. "Deep breaths," he said. "Count backward from 100 for me." I thought of the window latch at home, the penny holding it true. I thought of the safe deposit key asleep in the cookbook and the words Tom left me, "Hold steady, Evie." I drew a breath and tasted plastic and air. 100, I said. 99, 98. The numbers fell like feathers. Mark's hand squeezed my shoulder. "I'll take care of everything," he repeated, softer now, as if saying it quietly made it more true. If only I'd known what those words would mean later. The mask settled, the world narrowed, and the lights above me blurred into a field of pale moons. I felt myself drifting, tethered by something thin and stubborn. I didn't understand it then, but everything was about to change. Conflict ignites. My phone vibrated like a trapped bee against the sheet. I wasn't fully awake. The room bent and wavered, and the air smelled sharp, the way clean does when it's trying too hard. I slid my thumb across the screen and saw the first message. "Are you moving?" the second said. "Who bought so fast?" Then came a photo of two men carrying my cedar chest down my front steps. The one Tom built from boards he sanded until they felt like bread. The lid hung open like a mouth that couldn't argue. Before I could answer, Mark's text came through. "It was time. Assisted living has a spot for you." My hand went colder than the IV pole. "It was time," he wrote, as if time were a person we both knew and trusted. He added, "For your good," and a thumbs up. Words kept appearing on the little screen while I lay still in a bed that beeped to prove I was alive. I pressed the call button. The nurse arrived in soft shoes and softer eyes. "Do you need anything, Mrs. Hart?" she asked. "I need to call my son," I said, and my voice came out thin, the kind of thin that makes you think of glass. She dialed and handed me the phone, then pretended to check a chart while the ring sounded in my ear. It went to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail again. I left a message that was mostly breath and two words: "Call me." The nurse adjusted my blanket and tucked it as if tucking could fix what had already come loose. "You're safe here," she said. I looked at the photo again. The man's hand covered the corner of the chest, and I could see the scratch from the year Mark dragged his toy truck across the lid. "Am I?" I asked, not because I doubted her care, but because safety is a strange word once it has been used as a tool. He came an hour later, full of that bright energy that reads as competence until you listen long enough to hear the wind in it. He stood at the foot of my bed, not close enough to touch. "It's cleaner this way," he said. "Insurance is tricky. The stairs are a problem. There's a wait list at the good places. When an opening comes, you take it." He spoke to the chart holder, not to my eyes. He said, "Fall risk like a spell and care plan like a solution." I asked, "What about my things?" It was a small question with a large room inside it. He reached into his folder and handed me a glossy brochure. A watercolor of a building sat under a tree that looked too polite to throw shade. "There are activities," he said. "Yoga, art, a van that takes you on outings." The brochure showed a woman about my age laughing at a salad. "What about my things?" I asked again. This time I meant my mixing bowl, my porch swing, the dent in the banister where a suitcase once kissed wood. "We handled it," he said. "You'll thank me later." He said "we," and I pictured a team I had not met moving through the rooms of my life with labels and permanent markers. He added, "The buyer needed to close before the end of the month. Strong offer as is, it's all in motion." His voice had the sound of a door that locked from the outside. "I didn't sign," I began. He clicked his pen. "You gave me the paper," he said. "You said if something came up I should keep you from stress. That's what I did. Medical for surgery for emergencies." I tasted the difference like a bitter rind. "Rest," he said, and patted the blanket. "Don't get worked up, it's safer." Ruth texted while he talked. "Do you want me there?" she wrote. I sent back, "Hold the blue ribbon album." She replied with a heart, the sturdy kind, not the fancy one. The nurse glanced at the brochure and pressed her lips together. "It's a nice place," Mark said, as if niceness solved betrayal. "They have a bird in the lobby. People love that." I nodded because my throat felt full of gravel and hope was too heavy to lift. When he left, the quiet that followed was not gentle. Machines breathed for the room. I stared at the ceiling and saw my house as if I were looking through a window I couldn't open. I saw the jar of pennies on the dresser, the quilt with the frayed corner, the way sunlight landed on the kitchen floor like a square rug at 10 every morning. I saw the porch light I had left on, burning for no one. A case manager stopped by with papers that sounded like plans. She spoke in calm sentences shaped like boxes. "Your son has arranged a short stay," she said. "We'll coordinate a safe discharge. Physical therapy will see you in an hour." She smiled in a way that said I should be grateful for the organization of my own displacement. I thanked her and felt the oddness of manners in the middle of a theft dressed as care. That night I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw men lifting my life like it was just weight. I tried to pray. The words came slow, a kind of breathing, "Help, hold, see." In the morning, my pulse lay in the range they wanted, and the surgeon nodded. "You're doing well," he said. "Take it easy. Let your family carry the load." I thought of who was carrying what, and it did not comfort me. 2 days later, they wheeled me downstairs. Mark signed where people told him to sign. Lena appeared, sleek as a line drawn by a ruler, and kissed the air near my cheek. "This will be good for you," she said, and handed me a bag with a cardigan that wasn't mine. In the car, the seat belt lay across my incision like a question. "I want to stop by the house," I said. Mark checked his mirrors the way men do when they're looking for a way out. "It's not a good day," he said. "They're doing some things." "Take me," I said, and my voice surprised all three of us. We turned onto my street, and everything looked almost the same. The maples made a thin canopy, winter light slipping through like paper. The porch light was off. My stomach dropped before my mind could catch it. When I reached for my key, it felt wrong in my hand, too light with purpose. I stepped onto the walk, and the porch swing creaked, but not for me. A man I had never seen sat there scrolling his phone like the swing belonged to him. He wore a vest with many pockets and shoes that squeaked. "Can I help you?" he asked, as if he were the one with the answer. "This is my home," I said. He pointed at the sold sign still planted in my roses. There was a bright red sticker across it that said closed. "I'm the buyer's cousin," he said. "Helping today." He smiled in the way people do when they think their smile is a shield. Tight timeline. I tried my key. It didn't fit. The lock turned into a mouth with no teeth for me. "They changed it," the man said, and then shrugged like the weather. Behind him, 2 more men moved down the steps with a box that had Tom's tools written in black marker. I knew the way that box felt when you lifted from the bottom so the tape wouldn't give. The sight of it sliding toward a van opened something inside my chest that had nothing to do with stitches. It was a hurt the surgeon would not have recognized. Ruth stood at the curb with her arms folded, her jaw set the way it was when she argued with the cable company. "I told them to wait on the cedar chest," she called. "They didn't." She looked at me, not at Mark, as if the truth still belonged to the person who could feel it. "You shouldn't be here," Mark said quietly, stepping between me and my own threshold. "You need to rest." His eyes slid off mine like rain. "Sir," the cousin said to Mark, not to me, "we're almost done. The stager's coming." He took a step that scooted my roses, and a thorn nicked his pant leg. I wanted to smile at that small bravery. Instead, I watched the van door close on the box with Tom's name. The sound of metal hitting metal felt like a stamp, a life sealed and sent. "Where are my papers?" I asked. "My marriage certificate, the handwritten recipe from your grandmother, the quilts." Mark rubbed his forehead with the heel of his hand. "It's all handled," he said. "We moved important things into storage. The rest will be sorted, don't worry." He had been the little boy who once begged me to keep a rock from the creek. Now he decided which of my stones were worth their weight. The porch smelled wrong, new paint, a perfume of hurry. I stepped back before the man could tell me again who I was not. Mark hustled me to the car with the soft push people use on old women and toddlers. I let him because grief takes both the knees and the fight. As we pulled away, Ruth reached into her bag and held up something square and blue-ribbed, high like a promise. I nodded and she nodded back. That small exchange steadied me more than any pill. The temporary apartment Lena found for now sat above a dentist's office and pretended to be a home. The walls were blank and smelled like detergent and someone else's dinners. The sofa was wide and gray with clean lines. It held me like a well-behaved bus stop. There were 2 forks, 2 spoons, and no history. The window looked out on a parking lot where strangers practiced backing in. Lena walked me through the kitchen as if I were on a tour. "There's a gym downstairs," she said, "and a community room with a puzzle table. We can bring over clothes, but let's keep it simple. Downsize first, then decisions." She handed me a folder with a calendar of activities printed in cheerful ink. I set it on the counter and listened to the sound it made, a light slap that had no echo. "What about the cedar chest?" I asked. "It was too heavy," Mark said. "We had to be practical. We'll replace it later with something easier to move. Minimal is modern." He smiled, that easy smile again, thinner now. "Mom, trust me." Trust, I thought, like a rope you don't know is frayed until you lean on it. They left after setting a pitcher of filtered water and a stack of forms on the table. "Rest," Lena said. "We'll come tomorrow. They've asked for the garage remote, by the way. Do you know where it is?" I stared at her and realized I did not want to share one more small thing today, not even a button-sized piece of plastic that said I belonged. "I'll look," I said and did not move. When the door clicked shut, the room went wide with quiet. I laid my hand on the small nightstand beside the rented bed. It had no scratches, no story. My palm slid across the top and found nothing to remember. What I felt instead was the outline of absence, like the faint rim a picture frame leaves on paint when you take it down. The life that wasn't invited left its shape anyway. I opened my purse to find lip balm and found myself instead. There, tucked behind an old grocery list and a folded church bulletin, lay the little envelope with the bank's address I had written years ago in my neat librarian hand. The paper had softened at the corners from being carried too long. Inside it would be the numbers I needed, the hours the vault opened, the reminder of where the safe deposit key belonged when the world forgot to be safe. I held the envelope and remembered tapping that key inside the cookbook, then pressing the page closed like a prayer. I could feel the page under my fingers even here, miles from my own kitchen. My heart beat calmer around that memory, as if the past had stretched out its hand in the present. I thought of Tom's voice saying, "Hold steady, Evie, not still, steady." I looked around the little apartment. The lamps tried hard. The rug had a pattern meant to hide stains. A clock ticked with enthusiasm but not meaning. It was a place for passing through. It was not a life. I thought of men in vests lifting boxes they didn't understand. I thought of the porch swing sighing under someone else's weight. My son had made choices while I was asleep. He had taken the part of love that trusts and turned it into permission. I set the envelope on the table where the morning light would find it first. The action felt small and large at once, like pressing a seed into dirt you hope remembers rain. If Mark could make choices in my sleep, I could make choices while awake. I wasn't loud. I didn't need to be. I breathed in, breathed out, and picked up my phone. His name glowed there, and so did another name I hadn't said in years. The lawyer with lemon drops and sweater vests who never rushed to truth. I stared at both, then at the envelope, then back at the door that led to a hallway that led to stairs that led to a street that still knew the way to the bank. I didn't know yet how deep the cut went or what it would take to stop the bleeding. I only knew that the person who had walked out of surgery had walked into a different house without moving. Night lowered itself over the parking lot. A car alarm chirped, then thought better of it. Somewhere a television laughed. I sat with my hands folded, the way Tom used to rest before turning a bolt that wouldn't budge. I had been a good patient. Now I would be a careful witness. The envelope weighted, thin and cert. I looked at it and felt something I hadn't felt since the porch light, belonging but not to a place, to a line inside me that could not be redrawn without my say. I turned off the lamp and let the dark do its honest work. Morning would come, and with it the task of finding what still had my name. But that was before I learned how quickly a single signature can close a door or open one I had forgotten I owned. Deepening the wound, they came the next afternoon with smiles and a stack of papers that looked important. Lena set her toad on the counter as if we were having tea, not a reckoning. Mark laid a folder in front of me and tapped it with 2 fingers like a gavel. His voice was warm and busy. "Below market, yes, but speed matters," he said, giving the words a shine I did not feel. "Think of it as a liquidity event that funds your care plan." He seemed proud he could stack those phrases on my table. I slid the folder closer and felt the chill through the manila. "I want to see everything," I said. Lena smiled the way people smile at a neighbor's cat. "Mark made it simple," she said. Simple sat in the room like a chair with one leg missing. He opened to a summary sheet and angled it toward me. My name appeared there in a font I had never used, thin and polite. The page listed an LLC I did not recognize and a sale price that made my stomach dip. I looked at the date stamp and felt the room tilt. It was marked at the exact hour I lay under anesthesia, counting backward for strangers. My signature was a photocopied ghost. "Where is the full set?" I asked. "You don't need all that," he said, quick as a curtain closing. "This is a high-level overview." He tapped the lines as if tapping made them good. "Why the LLC?" I asked. "It streamlines things," he said. "Who owns it?" He hesitated, then smiled like a salesman praising weather. "A friend of a partner," he said. "It kept the process efficient." Efficient had replaced honest without asking my permission. "What about Tom's tool bench?" I said, seeing the oil stains and the pegboard in my mind. Lena touched my wrist with 2 careful fingers. "It was old," she said, the pity in her tone sounded smooth. "We're making things easier to manage." Old had never meant useless in my house. Old meant proven. I closed the folder and felt my pulse thud against the thin scar under my gown. "I need to speak with Mr. Hale," I said. Mark sighed like someone watching rain ruin a picnic. "Lawyers make everything harder," he said. "Mom, trust me." Trust had become a bridge he asked me to cross while he lit matches at the far end. They left when my answers began to land like stones. The door shut with the neat clap of a plan pleased with itself. I dialed Mr. Hale and listened to the slow ring that sounded like a hallway. He answered on the 4th and said my name the way you say a book you've loved. I told him about the sale, the hour, the paper I had meant for medicine, not for moving. He listened until the room got quiet around us. Then he asked one question that opened a window. "Evelyn, did you ever record a life estate after Tom died?" The words clicked into place like a key turned by memory. I saw the day after the funeral when we sat in his office and signed a form that promised my right to live in the house until my last breath. "We did," he said, and I heard paper sliding across a desk miles away. "I'll pull it." He asked if I was safe. I said yes because I was in a chair and breathing, which some days is all the proof you get. He told me not to sign a thing and to keep the papers I had like dry wood. After we hung up, the apartment felt too square. I walked from sink to window and back, learning the corners like a new bruise. Ruth texted that she was coming up with something for me to see. She arrived with a scarf around her neck and a flash drive in her fist like a talisman. Your doorbell camera caught plenty, she whispered, as if the walls could take sides. We plugged it into my little laptop and watched men we did not know lifting my cedar chest like a prize. They hurried, shoulders hunched, as if speed could make them innocent. Another said, "Get the photo albums too," and my throat closed around air. We watched a box labeled Winter go into a van, and whether that was. Ruth squeezed my shoulder until my bones felt the truth of her hand. "We'll get it back," she said, but even her brave voice had a tremor at the end. I copied the clips onto my desktop and named the folder House. Then I made tea on the electric stove that hissed like a snake that didn't want to be tamed. Ruth washed the one cup and the one spoon and talked about the church bake sale as if normal could stitch me back together. When she left, she kissed my temple and said, "Hold steady." I sat on the edge of the rented bed and folded and unfolded Tom's handkerchief until the cot went warm. The square of fabric still smelled faintly of cedar and soap, a memory of clean days. I prayed like I had been taught, not with fancy sentences but with hunger. "Lord, don't let me hate my own child," I said into the quiet, and the quiet held me. Hate felt heavy, a coat I could put on by mistake and never take off. I asked for a softer heart and a stronger spine. I asked to see what was mine without losing what made me me. Grief moved through me like weather that could not decide if it wanted to rain or freeze. I felt the house the way you feel a missing tooth with your tongue, always going back to the place that isn't there. I mourned like a widow twice over, once for Tom, once for walls that had learned our names. Yet under the noise of sorrow, something steadier tapped, patient as a metronome. It was the memory of a lakeside deed no one mentioned anymore, a thin piece of paper that had slept in a box while our lives got loud. Mark had asked me to hold it during a storm he called divorce, a quick cover, nothing to see. I had said yes the way mothers say yes when they believe help is the same as love. Mr. Hale had filed it to my name alone, clean and quiet. Years passed and the lot sat by the lake, a strip of trees and water and unasked questions. Now the questions woke and stood at the foot of my rented bed. What did that paper mean today? What did it mean that a thing hidden in my keeping might have more to say than the glossy brochure on my table? I thought of the safe deposit key asleep in the cookbook between recipes for comfort food and funerals. I could feel the page with my fingertips even here, as if the book were a living thing that wanted to be found. I set the folder Mark had left on the table and placed my palm flat until my breath matched the beat under my skin. If the house could be sold out from under me, then secrets could be sold out from under him. Not out of spite, I told myself, but out of balance. Justice is a level, Tom used to say, it tells you when the shelf is right. I wanted the bubble in the middle again. Morning would bring banks and records and the kind of light that shows dust you missed. I didn't understand the whole path yet, but I could feel the first step under my feet. Turning point / secret revelation morning found me before the alarm, the little envelope waiting where I had left it, pale against the fake wood. I slid it into my purse and called a taxi because I did not want Mark's car or his voice. The driver was a quiet woman with a knit cap and a thermos that smelled of cinnamon. We passed the bakery, the dark windows of the diner, and the square where the flag hung stiff in the cold. I kept my palm over my purse the whole ride like a mother riding herd on a secret. When we pulled up to the bank, I felt steadier than I had since the hospital. I wasn't rushing. I was returning to something I knew how to hold. The lobby smelled like paper and lemon, the way banks always did when I was a young wife counting paychecks. A guard nodded. A teller with silver hair recognized my face from years of deposits and church bake sales. I showed my license and recited the number I had written on envelopes since Tom's hands were strong. The manager led me through the heavy door, then down the short corridor that swallowed sound. We stopped at the vault, its round face like a moon with secrets. She brought out the slim metal drawer and laid it on a table. When I turned the key, my fingers stopped shaking. The click felt like memory making up its mind. Tom used to call this box our proof of memory. He said the world could forget on purpose, but paper had a slower mind. Inside lay a neat stack, copies of our wills, a certified letter I had never opened, and the deed to a narrow lot on Cedar Lake titled to me alone. The paper carried that county smell, ink and dust and rain. I ran my finger along the edge and saw Mark as he had been the day he asked me to babysit it during his divorce, his voice tired, his smile pleading. I had said yes, mothers do. Time had settled over that yes like silt. Now the water had cleared and the shape beneath was plain. Beneath the deed lay one more sheet I had half forgot. It was a promissory note, signed by Mark in a younger script, for the money he had borrowed when he launched his office. Mr. Hale had secured it with a lien on certain business accounts, small but real, the way a well-placed nail holds a shelf true. My chest rose and fell as I read the dates. He had promised to repay in seasons that had already come and gone. The ink had not faded. Promises do not fade just because we do not look at them. I sat on the vault bench and let the quiet wrap around me like a coat that fit for the first time. I called Mr. Hale from that bench. The signal was strong inside the thick walls, as if truth didn't need much help to travel. He answered with my name and a pause that told me he was sitting down. I told him about the sale, the hour on the stamp, the glossy brochure that tasted like paint. He listened like a good reader without interrupting the sentence. When I finished, he cleared his throat. Your life estate was recorded, he said. It's valid and it was ignored. We can unwind this, but it will be messy. I closed my eyes and saw lemon drops in a cut glass bowl. Messy is fine, I said. I'm steady. He told me to gather copies and to breathe. I spread the papers on the little table, their edges making a map. The deed to the lake lot lay like a quiet answer. I remembered Mark's voice when he had brought it to me, low and urgent, asking me to help him keep things from getting messy. Messy had come anyway. I could keep carrying his secret like a sack that bruised my shoulder, or I could set it down where it might do some good. A sentence wrote itself inside me, the same one that had started in the hospital and would not stop. I sold his secret, not to hurt him, but to open the windows he had nailed shut. The thought felt clean. I called the conservation trust that had been courting Lakeshore for public access since before Tom got sick. Their director, a woman with a calm voice and teacher's patience, remembered our names. We've always loved that strip, she said. It connects the trail to the small beach. I told her I was ready. We moved like careful people, not like the men who loaded my chest. An appraiser walked the snow-patched ground and marked the old oaks with ribbons. The trust's board met midweek and approved an offer that felt fair, not flashy. We signed at a quiet table with pens that didn't squeak. The wire settled into my account and with it my breath. With part of the proceeds, I retained Mr. Hale without blinking at the retainer. He set up a separate account to fund filings, notices, and the kind of patience the law demands. Another part I set aside for what my heart had wanted even in anger. A small scholarship in Tom's name for students learning a trade. He believed in straight work and level shelves, in hands that ended the day tired and honest. Turning something hidden into something honest felt like speaking his language again. I kept enough for the unknowns, then scanned every page in the vault packet and backed them up twice. When I closed the laptop, the room looked clearer, as if dust had finally been named. Mark called that evening because rumors travel faster than truth. His voice had a new edge, thin and bright like foil. I heard you did something with the lake, he said. I didn't make him chase me for it. I sold it, I said, to the Conservation Trust, clean, legal, and quiet. He went silent long enough that I could hear him decide whether to shout. You can't do that, he finally said, each word careful. It was mine. I let the stillness do my work. It was titled to me, I said. You asked me to hold it, I did. Now I'm using it to make things right. My heart beat hard and even, like a drum that knew its job. He started to talk fast, the way he does when truth corners him. He said family like a trump card and mother like a net. I let him run until the rope burned. I told him about the life estate. It was recorded, I said. You ignored it when you sold the house. The law will not. He said he didn't remember. I said the county did. He said it was complicated. I said it was simple. Don't make a scene, he warned. I don't need, I answered. We'll see you in a room with a long table. After the call, I labeled folders, set funds aside, and waited. Door to justice was opening, and I was standing inside. The public reckoning / justice moment the door I had felt opening became a real one with a brass handle and a scuff at the bottom. I entered the wood-paneled hearing room with Mr. Hale at my side and Ruth 2 steps behind. The air smelled like polish and old paper. A row of portraits watched from the wall, stern men who loved rules more than stories. I chose a seat where my feet could touch the floor. My hands folded without shaking. I reminded myself that steady did not mean still. The county clerk called the case, his voice formal and dry as a leaf. He read the filings in a calm list, not looking at anyone. Sale executed during my surgery, medical power of attorney used beyond its purpose, life estate ignored, buyers LLC tied to Mark's business partner's cousin. Each phrase landed like a small hammer. I felt the room listening. A young reporter shifted her notebook. The buyer's cousin stared at the floor as if the varnish might save him. Mr. Hale rose with a teacher's calm. His sweater vest looked like it had never known panic. He spoke in short sentences the board could stack. He explained the difference between a narrow medical authorization and a deed. He projected the recorded life estate onto the screen so the print filled the wall. The clause reserving my right to live in my home for life lit the oak paneling like a window. Even the air seemed to pause. The chair of the board, a woman with silver hair in a low bun, asked if I wished to speak. I stood and gave my name, then told them the simple truth. I had been under anesthesia while strangers carried my cedar chest to a van. I said I had signed a narrow paper for surgery day, not a blank check. My voice stayed even. I kept it short because grief is longer than any meeting. Mark stood next, his tie straight, his jaw held tight. He spoke about safety and urgency, about stairs and blood pressure, about insurance and wait lists. He said, my mother needed care and I did what families do. The words had shine but no weight. They fell to the floor and did not move. The chair asked about the LLC. He said it kept things efficient. She asked who owned it. He said, a friend of my partner's cousin. The room heard the circle close. Mr. Hale kept his voice gentle and asked 3 questions that fit like keys. Did the medical paper allow sale of real property? Was I conscious and informed at closing? Was the life estate visible in the county record at the time of transfer? To each, the clerk answered the same word: no, no, and yes. The board members looked at one another as if someone had opened a window. Cold air of fact replaced the warm fog of excuse. Ruth walked to the microphone like a woman carrying soup to a sick friend. She stated her name, then told them about the moving trucks that arrived before noon, the men hurrying, the box labeled Tom's TOOLS, the cousin on my swing. She offered the doorbell clips. For a minute the room became my porch. We all heard a voice on the video say, "Get the photo albums too." A whisper moved through the back row, a human sound the law always hears. Lena sat 2 chairs behind Mark, legs crossed, heels shining like coins. She avoided my eyes and watched the clock. When the chair invited her to speak, she declined with a tilt of the head. Her silence had an elegance that felt like distance. Mark's partner leaned forward, ready to help, then seemed to think better of it when Mr. Hale placed the promissory note on the table just for context. The partner's mouth pinched, as if lemons had arrived without sugar. The board retired for a short break. I sat very still and watched a dust mote dance in a shaft of light. My heart beat steady, steady, steady. Ruth took my hand and pressed it between both of hers like a prayer. "Whatever they say, you are not alone," she whispered. On the other side of the aisle, Mark checked his phone, then checked it again. His shoulders rose and fell in a rhythm I knew from his childhood when truth boxed him in. When the board returned, the chair spoke without heat. She found that the transfer violated my recorded right to occupy my residence for life. She declared the deed void as to my interest and ordered title corrected. She referred the matter to the State Real Estate Commission for ethical review. She directed restitution for losses, including items removed without consent, and noted that further civil action remained open to me. Her words were simple and exact. They fit the facts like a lid on a jar. A bailiff placed a small envelope on the table before me. Inside lay 2 keys on a ring with a paper tag that said Heart Front. They were not my old keys, those were gone. These were new, cut for the lock the buyer had installed. The board had ordered access restored at once. The metal felt cool in my palm, the way truth does when it finally drops from the air to the hand. I closed my fingers and felt weight again. In the hall, voices rose and then hushed. Mark's partner cornered him by the bulletin board and spoke in a fierce whisper about the lake thing now burning through group chats. He asked why he had not been told. He asked whether the lien meant what he feared. Mark spread his hands the way men do when they need room where there isn't any. He saw me watching and looked away. The partner's face held both anger and a fast math problem he did not like. Lena left early, her heels ticking like a clock you cannot stop. She brushed my arm on her way past, a glancing touch that tried to be neutral. I did not follow her. I did not chase any of them. I breathed and let the building hold me for a minute more. The portraits on the wall seemed less stern now. Rules had met a story and decided they could live in the same sentence. Mr. Hale gathered our copies and slid them into a neat envelope labeled with my name in his careful hand. "The order will record by afternoon," he said. "We will follow with letters. Change the locks anyway. Keep receipts." He did not gloat. He did not scold. He simply completed the square. I thanked him the way you thank a surgeon who puts bones back in line. He put a lemon drop in my palm and smiled like a man who trusts old remedies. We stepped outside into noon light that felt earned. The sky was pale and high. A bus rumbled past and made the flag ripple over the courthouse door. Ruth slipped her arm through mine and we stood for a moment without speaking. Across the steps, Mark leaned against a pillar like a boy who had run faster than his breath. When he saw us, he pushed off and came toward me, slower than he used to. "Mom," he said, and the word came out scraped. "I'm sorry." For a heartbeat, he looked like the boy who brought me pocket rocks. Then his eyes slid toward the street where his partner waited, and he was a man again, running numbers. "I thought I was helping. I thought you'd be safe." I let the words hang like laundry on a line. Some pieces were clean, some weren't. "You rushed me out of my own life," I said, quiet. "You used a paper for healing as a key to a door that wasn't yours." "Safety isn't a word that moves furniture without asking." He winced and nodded, "Not all the way." I walked back inside and signed the receipt for the keys. At the microphone, I said only, "My husband taught me to hold steady. I am steady now." No one argued. Ruth squeezed my elbow. The hallway felt wider. Truth lived on paper and in breath. I tucked the keys away and turned toward home, wondering what damage waited behind my door that day. Aftermath and reflection, the house did not welcome me back with trumpets. It breathed and I breathed with it. The new keys turned and the latch hesitated, like a friend deciding whether to trust me again. Inside, winter light lay thin across the floor. The air held paint and dust and a faint note of lemon from the polish Mark's stager had used. I stood in the doorway and let my eyes adjust to my own life. A dent on the banister waited where a hurried shoulder had kissed it. A gouge scarred the hardwood where the cedar chest had been dragged, a pale wound against the darker grain. Someone had returned a box of kitchen things, but the order was wrong. High plates sat with pots, measuring spoons hid with tea strainers, and the wooden spoon Tom carved lay upside down as if ashamed. I opened windows. Cold air moved through the rooms like clear water through a jar, pushing out the stale smell of decisions made without me. I I rinsed beans and set them to simmer with onion and bay, the old way Tom liked on cold days when work wore him thin. The pot whispered on the stove, a small sound that made the house remember its job. I walked room by room, touching edges. A thumbprint smudged the glass of our wedding photo. I left it, proof that I was present. In the bedroom, a drawer gaped, emptied and then stuffed with the wrong shirts. In the hallway, a picture hook hung lonely, a little mouth waiting for a voice. I did not cry, I made a list. Mr. Hale's plan unfolded like careful handwriting. The county recorded the board's order that afternoon. A locksmith came before dusk and changed the locks again, this time for me. Mark began making payments from a schedule Mr. Hale drafted. Monthly amounts to replace the losses and a tally for damaged items. The State Real Estate Commission placed his license on probation and assigned ethics classes. He would finish community service with seniors at the center 2 blocks from my church. Someone from the buyer's family sent a polite email about retrieving the last of their staging supplies. I replied with my own list in a firm tone. The cedar chest came home with 2 new scratches. A neighbor found my grandmother's recipe box in a bin marked MISC and brought it over wrapped in a towel like a baby. We opened it at the table. Flour dust rose like a blessing. Some things return out of order, some return stronger for the trip. Lena moved in with her sister for space. That was how she said it, and the pause around the word did the rest. I did not ask questions and she did not offer answers. When she came by once to collect shoes, her eyes were rimmed with the kind of red that tries to pass as style. She stood on the porch, looked past me into the hall and said, "This has all been hard." I nodded. We let the sentence sit between us like folded laundry. Then she turned and went down the steps, heels soft now. I tended to quiet chores. I washed the teacups that had been stacked wrong and put them back where the handles faced the same way. I mended a pillowcase with tiny invisible stitches the way my mother taught me. I swept the back steps and shook the doormat and watered the spider plant that had forgiven everyone. I wrote checks to the utility companies with my own hand and felt my name sanctify the line. At night, I sat on the porch with a blanket and listened to the neighborhood breathe. Ruth brought over a small bag of peony roots saved from Tom's patch. They looked like knuckled hands, brown and stubborn and full of promise. We carried them to the strip of earth by the fence. The soil broke under my trowel with the sound of paper tearing. We set each root in a small cradle of compost and turned them toward the faint April sun. I pressed dirt in with both palms, the way you tuck in a child who has finally fallen asleep. Silence did some teaching. It taught me how to stop rehearsing the worst parts so often that they lived louder than the day in front of me. It taught me to wait 10 breaths before answering questions that tried to hurt me. It taught me that forgiveness was not a door I could walk through once, but a path I would have to sweep every morning. When neighbors asked if I was back for good, I said yes and meant only that I had a key again and would use it. Mark came on Tuesdays with envelopes. He placed them on the table with the care of a man setting down a fragile box. He did not stay long, not at first. He read the room, found no anger he could argue with, and retreated. Once he asked if the swing felt the same after the new chains. I said yes because metal either holds or it does not. Another time he brought a receipt for a toolbox he had found at a weekend sale, a poor cousin to Tom's. I thanked him without taking it. Some things could not be replaced by shopping. On a windy Thursday, weeks after the hearing, he texted asking if he could help in the yard. I stared at the message for a long minute because help can be another word for control. Then I said yes and set the rake by the porch. He arrived with gloves already on and did not try a speech. We worked without small talk. He pulled last year's stems. I cleared the dead leaves that had gathered like secrets. The fence post wobbled and he tamped soil around it with the heel of his boot until it stood straight again. After an hour, he set the rake aside and asked for the hose. I turned the spigot and water leaped skyward before falling into his cupped hands. I told him about the scholarship I had set up with part of the lake money, a small fund at the technical school in Tom's name for students learning a trade. Carpentry, electrical, plumbing, welding work that leaves a mark that doesn't vanish when the market twitches. Mark listened, eyes on the soil. He would like that, he said. He liked anyone who made something you could stand on. That lot was never a prize, I said. It was a shadow. He nodded, the boy in him peeking through, the boy who used to bring me nails like treasure while Tom built shelves in the garage. I see that now, he said, and a small stone seemed to drop from the sack he carried. We did not hug. We rinsed our hands under the same hose and watched the dirt run clear over the pebbles, thin streams joining into one line and slipping toward the street. It was not forgiveness finished. It was forgiveness beginning to breathe. I knew the hardest part still waited inside. Moral closure. I learned that peace grew best when I told the truth without shaking. In the weeks after the board's decision, I kept a small notebook on the kitchen table and wrote what the house taught me. Love without boundaries was not love. It was relief for the person taking more than they were due. Signatures mattered. Promises needed paper, witnesses, and dates, so the wind could not carry them away. Elders had to write our names in ink, not air, and keep copies where we could reach them with our own hands. I met with Mr. Hale at the oak table in his office, the same room where Tom once teased me for checking commas. We built a living trust with quiet clauses that fit my life. The house stayed in it, the bank accounts flowed through it, and anything new would land there like a bird coming home. We drafted a narrow, specific power of attorney for medical hours only, with 2 layers of oversight, so one eager voice could never outshout mine again. We added a letter to myself, sealed in the safe deposit box, titled "In Case of Smooth Talk." Inside, in my neat hand, I wrote, "Breathe, call Ruth, call Mr. Hale, read every line, and never sign what sleep should refuse." I also wrote 1 page to Mark, printed and dated, not for guilt but for clarity. It said, "I am your mother, not a project. I will accept help when I ask for it. If I cannot ask, the people named here will ask with me." I tucked copies into the binder with the medicine list, the church numbers, and a map to the bank. I labeled the tabs in large letters so even worry could not pretend it was lost. Forgiveness arrived differently. It did not sweep in like spring. It came like a chore you do daily, checked the way I checked my blood pressure. Each morning I sat with tea and measured my pulse against the last sharp memory. If the number ran high, I breathed and read a psalm, then named something decent Mark had done when he was too young to know better. Forgiveness was not a feeling, it was a discipline, and it did not cancel the bill. It kept me from becoming the thing I hated. On a Sunday in late March, the hymn rose like a warm wind and went up through the rafters. I felt it move through my ribs and loosen a knot I had carried since the hospital. When I turned, I saw Mark standing at the back, his eyes wet, his hands empty. He did not come forward for show. He stood and listened like a man who could finally hear words that did not have his name in them. After the service, we walked home slow, as if the sidewalk had grown longer to give us time. The swing had been fixed with new chains and the porch smelled like clean rain. We sat side by side, not touching, our knees making 2 small tents under the quilt. He studied the floorboards. "What did Dad mean?" he asked. "When he told you to hold steady?" I let the chain creak once before I answered. "He meant I didn't have to match anyone's speed," I said. "He meant I could choose my stance, not their storm. Steady doesn't mean still, it means I don't wobble when you do." He nodded, and the nod looked like relief. We spoke then about repair the way carpenters do, plain and numbered. He agreed to keep payments coming without reminders. I agreed to answer his texts without sermons. He told me the commission's classes were humbling, that he had sat in a circle with agents who had confused speed with service and pressure with care. He volunteered at the senior center, wheeling someone's husband to bingo, fixing a lamp, hearing stories he could not sell. We didn't clap. We let the changes prove themselves by staying. That afternoon, I walked him through the binder like a teacher who loves the subject. "Here is the trust," I said. "Here are the witnesses, the phone list, the safe deposit instruction. If anything happens, there are 3 calls before any decision. Ruth, Mr. Hale, Pastor Lane. We move at the speed of understanding, not the speed of fear." He looked up a little wry. "You've always liked rules," he said. "I like peace," I answered. "Rules are the fence that keep it in." I wrote to the Conservation Trust and asked them to send a photo when the trail sign went up. A week later, a small plaque appeared near the oaks. "Cedar Lake Access Community Gift in honor of Tom Hart." I stood there with Ruth while geese stitched the sky with their noisy thread. A boy tossed a stone and its ring widened until it kissed the shore. I felt something inside me widen too, a permission I had not given myself in months, joy without guilt. At home, I hung a small frame over the desk with 3 rules I promised to keep. 1. Ask for help before the crisis while I still recognize my own voice. 2. Keep duplicates of anything that carries my name. 3. Never confuse quiet with consent. The paper looked plain, but it carried heat. When fear tried to talk, I read the frame aloud until it gave up. On the first warm night of May, I clicked the porch light on and left the door open to the screen. Moths tested the mesh and drifted away. A radio carried a ballgame down the block. Mark arrived without a folder. We sat, the swing settled into a rhythm, chains whispering. He asked what I needed now. "Respect," I said, "and truth even when it costs." He nodded once, then twice, sealing a compact. The camera of memory pulled back on our small house, the porch light no longer a warning but a welcome. Audience connection, come sit with me on this porch a moment, friend. The swing is steady and the light is on. If your child sold your home in your sleep, what would you do first? Fight, forgive, or both? I asked myself a question the day I turned a new key and smelled paint over old hurt. Maybe your story isn't a house. Maybe it's a bank account, a car title, a promise someone bent while you were looking the other way. Either way, it stings. So let's name it out loud here where calm still holds. What would you do first and who would you call? Tell me in the comments what you wish you had learned sooner about wills, deeds, and boundaries. What was the page you didn't read, the signature you rushed, the question you were afraid to ask? I am not here to shame you. I am here to keep you company while you grow braver. If you've walked through a betrayal, your words can light someone else's hallway. If you're only now feeling the first tremor, your question can keep your future whole. Say what matters, even if your voice shakes. The first voice that needs to hear you is your own. Here is what Help Me offered. Write things down, use ink and dates. Keep your own keys, literal and legal. Name 2 or 3 witnesses who love you enough to say no when no is holy. Make a narrow power of attorney for health only and layer it with a person who must be present. Separate finances from medicine. If someone is honest, they will welcome structure. If they resist, resistance is information. Keep originals where you can touch them and copies where panic can't hide them. Paper is slow on purpose, let it slow you. Make a binder that a good friend could run without guessing. List your doctors, medicines, bills, passwords kept in a safe place and a map to your safe deposit box. Tape a note to yourself inside that box, in case of smooth talk. Mine says breathe, call Ruth, call Mr. Hale, read every line, sleep on it, test your plan before you need it, hold a practice day with your witnesses and walk through a pretend emergency. Agree on a code phrase that means stop everything and wait. Decide in daylight. If a decision can't survive until morning, it isn't safe. Make one house rule for your heart: no rush. Salesmen rush, fear rushes, love does not. Say, I don't make big choices fast. Say, let me read this out loud. Reading turns tricks into truth. Ask, who benefits if I hurry? If the answer is not both of us, slow the car. Keep an independent account for emergencies you control. Keep your phone and your paperwork protected with your own passwords. Choose a second set of eyes who is not enchanted by your child's charm. Boundaries are not walls against love, they are walls against weather. Inside them, love grows. Tell someone your plan. Secrets are where harm grows. Share your wishes with a friend, a sibling, a pastor, a neighbor who has already shown up with soup. If money is tight, call legal aid, your area agency on aging, or the senior center. Ask a banker to help you set alerts on accounts. Set your phone to require your face and a code. Keep your documents in a fire box, not a glove compartment. If you're scared of computers, say so. There is always a patient person in your circle who will sit beside you and teach without sighing. And when the hurt comes, because sometimes it will, let yourself hold two truths at once. You can fight and forgive. You can press for restitution and pray for your child. Consequences belong with the person who took the choice away. Bitterness belongs to no one. Forgiveness was not soft, it was strong. It kept the gate open for change without letting the wolves in. Some days I managed it, some days I measured it and tried again tomorrow. If your apology never comes, you can still choose dignity. You can choose a calm that does not wobble. So tell me, dear one, what line will you write across your own life today? What sentence will protect your future self? Will you leave a note in your safe deposit box? Will you make a binder and a rule that says, I do not sign fast? Who holds your spare key and who holds your spare courage? Share your answer below or share it at your table tonight. Someone you love is waiting for permission to be careful. Give it to them. Give it to yourself. Let your porch light mean welcome, not warning. Let respect come home and stay. Before you go, take this with you. Respect is the roof over love. Without it, the weather gets in. Thank you for sitting with my story, which might be your neighbor or your sister or the one you haven't had to tell yet. Wisdom doesn't retire, it just changes shoes. I wish I'd known what was about to happen the day I signed that paper. If this helps you know before it happens, then Tom's promise kept us both. Hold steady. Choose peace with backbone. And when the world asks for your keys, smile kindly and say, not today, not without me.